Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Karen Turner, so good morning. I'm CEO of Turner Government and Public Affairs. We're very excited to have you join us today for our terrific webinar of capital markets, Fannie Freddie mortgage derivatives, and more. I cannot divulge the names of all our participants, but we're extremely pleased with our turnout, and many of you are from highly esteemed Fortune 100 corporations as well as top national policymakers. So before we start the presentation, I'd like to go through some basics on the webinar. And on your screen you'll find a control panel. And on the panel are sections for questions and chat. If you have a question, you may ask it by submitting it through the question panel. You will not be able to participate verbally, but we do encourage your questions. I will moderate the webinar today along with Mark Guymond, one of our most well-known and valued senior lobbyists. Mark specializes in financial services, but you're probably more familiar with him with his efforts that resulted in the repeal of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. In addition, Mark is known for his Hollywood good looks and Team USA rowing. We are, of course, here for a webinar with Chris Russell, and Chris has been very modest about his many accomplishments, but he is now senior counsel with the United States House of Representatives Financial Services Subcommittee on Capital Markets. And Chris has been also with Congressman Garrett for 8 years, moving up from the ranks to just every year seems to be getting another promotion, doing fabulously well. Before that he was with Lamar Smith and with Asa Hutchinson. He's originally from Arkansas, a Razorback fan, and one of his most esteemed and one of his accomplishments he's most proud of is successfully passing an amendment to Dodd-Frank which exempts small businesses from complying with auditing requirements in SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley. So I'd like to move over to some of the work that Chris is an expert on financial services, as is Mark, and I'd like to move over to some of the work that Congressman Garrett has been doing. As you know, he's chairman of the Subcommittee on Capital Markets and Government-Sponsored Enterprises for the House Financial Services Committee. The subcommittee has jurisdiction over the SEC, government-sponsored enterprises, including Fannie and Freddie. The subcommittee also handles all matters related to Federal Housing Finance Agency capital market activities, such as business capital formation, venture capital, and derivative instruments. And finally, the congressman also serves as a committee member of the House Budget Committee. And in this capacity, as with all members of Congress right now, he and everyone else seems to be bracing for the coming and existing budget battles. Congressman Garrett is a leading advocate of tax relief and pro-growth economy policies that return the focus to the family budget, authoring and supporting initiatives that keep more of your money in your pocket. Congressman has also been working to improve accountability and transparency in the budget process and other government practices to ensure that the government is responsive to our needs as a nation. So, now that we've introduced everyone, I'd like to move to our first topic, which is understanding the new Congress, which is a bit confusing to most of us. And Chris, we'd really welcome your insights on it. We have about 1/4 of the House of Representatives are new members, and these members were elected in just the worst economic crisis we've had since the Great Depression, into a country that involved and is involved in currently with 2 wars, extreme social unrest, and many of these new members are extremely young and not beholden to traditional vested interests in Washington. These Tea Party members even pitch themselves as being absolutely revolutionary. And so we'd like to get some of your ideas on both the fissures in the or discord within the Republican Party and also the discord in the Democratic Party regarding, say, the Blue Dogs from the more leftist groups, and how is this new Congress going to pull together to accomplish things that we need in this nation. So thanks, Chris.
Well, thanks, Karen, for that kind introduction. Much appreciated, and appreciate the invitation to be here with everyone today. And I think you raised it's very interesting to think about all the current changes going on and all the issues that we have to face. Where obviously, Congress is dealing with a lot of big things right now, and so it's a very interesting time to be here in Washington and dealing with a lot of these issues. To kind of get at the last question that you raised in terms of the interaction of the members and how all these new members here in Congress are working with each other and the new coalitions that will be forming and the way everything is going to play out. I'd like to specifically get to one of the things about how the changes and how Speaker Boehner and some of the things, policies or reforms that he's implementing in terms of the process, and maybe explain some of that and discuss how that is actually going to really have an impact on how a lot of these policy decisions ultimately get resolved at the end of the day. I think if you look back as far back as pretty much my entire time that I've been on the Hill, when we had Mr. DeLay was the majority leader and Speaker Pelosi for the last 4 years, I think you've seen their approach has to do with a much more leadership-driven approach in terms of running the House. And I think Speaker Boehner is committed to just showing, or kind of devolving that power, if you will, back out to the committee chairman, to having open processes like we did during this continuing resolution discussion for the FY11 budget this last week. And I think by allowing a lot of those to have this kind of open debate, I think that while at the end of the day, the Republicans or the Republican leadership may not win every vote or have it go exactly how they want, but you're letting the process work. And I think when you let the process work, I think ultimately everyone will work a lot better together and get to a common goal. Just this last week, we had, it was amazing. The members spent over 90 hours on the floor, had over 600 amendments filed to the continuing resolution, and in my 10 years on the Hill, I've never seen anything quite like it, and it was quite an amazing process, and we finally got wrapped up at about 5-something in the morning, Saturday morning. I fortunately didn't have to stay that long, but I know Congressman Gitt was here, and the bill was ultimately passed, cutting about $100 million from the President's FY11 budget. So I think if that process continues to go forward, it's really going to have an impact, because I think we're going to have a lot more open rules, because I think the process was pretty much widely praised on both sides of the aisle, that all members had an opportunity to weigh in, to put forth their proposals, to discuss what they think is best for the country. And I think you're going to continue to see that going forward. And so I think that to get to all the new members, the 87 new freshman Republicans that we have, many of them Tea Party freshmen, they're going to allow those people to really play a direct role in a lot of the process. And if they vote in block, that's going to be a very important and powerful block in deciding a lot of these decisions going forward. Unfortunately, the Senate went in recess this week instead of trying to actually pass a budget. So now we're confronted with the issue of bumping up against the March 4th deadline of having the CR go under. And so it's going to be interesting to see what plays out over the next week and a half in terms of a possible government shutdown. I know no one on our side or no one on both sides wants to have that happen. So we've got some timing issues, but our membership on our side is very serious about cutting. You mentioned Congressman Garrett's role in the Budget Committee. He's the vice chairman of the Budget Committee. And so he's been actively and intimately involved in a lot of these budget negotiations with the leadership and Chairman Ryan. And all the feedback he's continued to receive from all the membership is that people are serious about actually getting some cuts across the board this time and making some cuts happen. And so I know that's going to be a big focus going forward. So what I'd like to do is, that's kind of where on the budget side on where we are, and it's going to be very interesting over the next couple weeks to see how this all plays out. And I'll be happy to discuss that further with people if they'd like to. What I'd like to then kind of turn to now is to kind of get on the Financial Services Committee, what the agenda is for the committee, for specifically the Capital Markets and GSE Subcommittee going forward this year, and kind of walk through some of the kind of big policy debates really quickly that we're going to have, and then I'll be happy to open it up to questions for whatever anyone has.